Hello, 7th graders. Today we're going to continue learning about understanding direct proportions, but now with equations. So it's important to remember that our direct proportion equation is y equals k times x. So in order for us to tell whether each equation is direct proportion, we have to get y by itself. So the first step that we would take in this first example, 1/2 times y equals 3x, is multiply both sides by 2. So that 1/2 and the 2's cancel, leaving us with y on the left side, and 3x times 2 is 6x. Now we can see that it is in direct proportion form, and our constant of proportion, or that coefficient of x, is 6. So we can shorten that as COP equals 6, also known as K. So you can always jot this down if you want. It says because the original equation, 1/2 y equals 3x, and it can be rewritten as an equivalent equation in the form of y equals k times x, it represents a direct proportion. The constant of proportionality is 6. So same thing for our second example here. We need to get y by itself, and in order to do that, we're first going to add 2 to both sides. And now we get y equals 5x plus 2. Well, looking back to our form, our y equals kx form, there's no addition in it. So actually, because of this plus 2, there's no constant of proportionality. Once again, it's described as because the original equation, y minus 2 equals 5x, cannot be rewritten as an equivalent equation in the form y equals k times x, it does not represent a direct proportion. Something to keep in mind is since y is directly proportional to x, you can use y over x equals k to find the constant of proportionality, so to find k. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. So here's our first example with that. It says y is directly proportional to x, so that's an indication that we can write it as y over x, and y equals 3 and x equals 9. So when y is 3, x is 9. We want to find the constant proportionality, then write a direct proportion equation. Well, we can simplify that to 1/3 by dividing the numerator and the denominator both by 3. And now it's in simplest form. Our constant of proportionality would be 1/3, and we can rewrite that in our direct proportion equation form, which is y equals k times x. And if we know that 1/3 is k, we can just go ahead and plug that right in there. Y equals 1/3 times x. Go ahead and pause the video and try this last one on your own. Come back and see how you did. So here, we're not using y anymore, x and y anymore, but it does tell us that q is directly proportional to p. Well, that's like writing q in terms of p, which would be like y in terms of x. So you can think of q as our output, or our y, and p as our x. So once again, q is going to go over p, like we would do y over x. So our q is 24, and our p is 12. And when we write that in simplest form, we get 2. 24 divided by 12 actually gives us 2. So the constant of proportionality is 2. And knowing our form, our direct proportion form, we have y equals k times x. But in this case, we'd actually write it as q equals k times p. And so we're plugging that 2 in for k and getting q equals 2p.